Hold on tight for the next hour. You're entering into a place, a zone called the alternative to the alternative media. It's a place, a special place where even truth seekers fear to tread.
All right, people, let's move like we've got a purpose.
Affirmative.
Okay, as they say in the mainstream news broadcasts, breaking news. Wow, what breaking news? It's the same old news all the time, and especially what's happened in the last 2 days. Hey, it's Greg Anthony here on the Investigative Journal on this April 10th, 2018 day on our calendar. And what a show I have for you today. But this, you always hear that breaking news. And then they break in with, World War III is just about to happen. It's been like this for years. And I've got to do the whole show. I mean, you can't not do the show on World War III after what happened in the last 48 hours in Syria. And if you listen to my show, this was maybe 3 weeks ago, I set the scenario for how World War III would take place, and it's exactly what's going on in the last 48 hours. I'll explain in a moment. So we're going to spend the whole show talking about, is World War III imminent in the next 24 to 48 hours? Be ready. But anyway, let me first talk about this. Has anybody seen that show Joe Paterno on HBO? Now, for those of you people who never follow football, shame on you. I used to play college football, and during the time Joe Paterno was coach at Penn State, he was like a god, right? I mean, everybody in the football world respected Joe Pa, they would call him, right? Now, I'd forgotten all about the Jerry Sandusky pedophile story until I turned on HBO last night, and Al Pacino starred as Joe Paterno. Good choice. He played it. You got to like Al Pacino, right? He doesn't do many TV commercials, right? That's why I like him. He doesn't get on the air and sell Lincolns like Matthew McConaughey and the rest of them, right? He doesn't sell his name, I guess. But Pacino played a great Joe Paterno. And if you don't know the story, I have to tell it to you. Paterno was a coach at Penn State for 61 years. He coached for 61 years. I don't know if he was at Penn State that long. When the show opened, he was in his 83 or 84. And they were playing for his 409th NCAA victory, okay? And on that campus in Penn State during that period of time, he was revered. I mean, the kids loved him. He had done if you look at what he had done as a football coach, if you just look from the outside in, he graduated 85% of his players. He stressed education. And he also always put a good football team on the field. And Penn State became a football power because of him. And you know what that means. It translates to money and revenue and millions of dollars. And I guess people used to say Joe Paterno is Penn State, right? Well, the show, of course, was all about the Jerry Sandusky pedophile story. He's now in jail on 45 counts of pedophilia. I mean, just horrendous things with kids in the football locker room, anal sex, etc., etc. And during that show, although Sandusky wasn't featured, the show was centered around that. And so what it did was create the story around Paterno's family. And in the show, it showed how Paterno reacted to the allegations first coming out, and then how the scandal mounted to a point where, in the end, Paterno had to resign with 4 football games left, and he asked that he finish out the season and then he would resign. In the meantime, the Board of Regents fired him, and which caused an uprising on the campus. The vice president as well as the athletic director were indicted. Of course, they lost their positions. And the rest is history if you followed Penn State football. They were sanctioned, and they've built up their program ever since then. But the story took a real horrendous turn for Paterno, and it centered around really this. Did Joe Paterno know that Jerry Sandusky was a pedophile? And in the show, throughout the whole show, you were kind of left in suspense. You got an idea that Paterno knew, but that he was told through other people that this was going on, and that he then went to the people he should have went to, the athletic director and the vice president, to tell them about Sandusky. But it seemed that the administration did absolutely nothing after they heard about some of these horrendous charges, correct? So the question became, when did Paterno know? I'll get to that in a second. But the other story is this. Sandusky was an assistant coach with Paterno for years, also played football at Penn State, and then became embroiled in this scandal. But before that happened, he started a foundation, a charity called Second Mile. And what Second Mile was all about was to help underprivileged kids. And he would raise millions and millions of dollars from some very wealthy elite to start Second Mile, which was a place where these underprivileged kids would come. And supposedly, they set up a whole almost community for them. And the question is, what was this foundation's role in this whole scandal? And who was involved behind the scenes with Sandusky and millions of dollars that kept Penn State's athletic director, president, etc., Paterno perhaps as well, from ever talking? And the question becomes, was there a lot of elite money coming in from elite politicians, elite businessmen, who were really being serviced by Sandusky with these children? Now, Sandusky's history goes back to 1978, and the movie ended with Paterno dying from cancer 2.5 months after the scandal erupted. And the last scene in the movie was really good, because the girl reporter who ended up winning a Pulitzer Prize because of this story, she worked for the local paper, a student there. And she was the one who talked to some of the first victims who came forward, these kids who came forward. And she carried the story out throughout the whole scandal. And she was interviewed many, hundreds of times by the mainstream media. And the last scene in the show is really important, because what Paterno, he passed away. She took a call from somebody who said that he had notified or talked to Joe Paterno about Jerry Sandusky's pedophilia and how he was a victim. Guess when? 1978. So, why did all these people turn a blind eye? My thinking was this. There was a lot of money behind the scenes. There was a lot going on in the pedophilia. You know as well as I do, we've done many shows on the pedophilia rings in this country, i.e. talking to many investigators, tracing some of the kids that have been missing, went missing in the 1980s and 90s, like Johnny Gosh from the Paperboy, from Des Moines, Iowa, and others, and traced their stories in these pedophilia rings going to the highest levels of people in our country, in the government and in business. And so my thinking is that these pedophile rings were being serviced through Jerry Sandusky, and thus there was a lot of money and power behind the scenes that apparently was more important to Joe Paterno and the Penn State brass than were these children. And that's my take on it. It wasn't just protecting Jerry Sandusky. That isn't the reason. There's something going way beyond the scenes, and it ties into the heavy pedophilia rings in this country. And no one better than we did an interview with Jim Rothstein, a New York police detective, years ago. And Jim has still, after he was fired from the police department or relieved of his duties for tracing pedophilia right to Cardinal Spellman in New York, relieved of his duties or he'd be killed, Jim still, for years after that, helped mothers and fathers who lost their children to these pedophilia rings. And the question always becomes is that I would ask Jim, I said, is it worse now than it was in the 80s and 90s? And he said, it's 10 times worse. Never gets better. And I also want you to remember this. When you look on those milk cartons and you see all those kids, just ask, where do they go? Because if you don't find your kid in 48 hours, you're never going to find them. And some of the cases that we followed on this show was a real good example of what happens. For example, there's a stand in the case of Johnny Gosch, this young paper boy who was kidnapped when he was 10 years old or 11 years old. His mother, there were witnesses just a few hours after it happened that he was picked up in a car and driven away. His mother went to the police, the local police, the police chief in Des Moines, Iowa, and demanded that they put up roadblocks and things like that. And guess what the police chief did? Even with this eyewitness testimony that he'd been stolen, taken off his bicycle, put in a car, and driven away, his police chief said, well, usually these kids just run away. We got to give it 24 to 48 hours before we can declare him missing. And Johnny Gosch's mother goes, what? We've seen that he was just taken away. Can't you do anything? The police would not do anything. The stand down came from orders from above. So what does that tell you? The police will not go after your kids if they're told by some people from above. Could it be the company, CIA? Could it be the FBI? Of course. And people who are protecting the elite pedophilias, the pedophiles. And these kids, after 48 hours, according to Jim Rothstein, are gone. You'll never find them again. And I asked Jim, I said, well, how do they get these kids away? What do they tell them? And he said many times what happens is once these kids are taken, they're trained, the people that take them are trained to tell these kids that their parents had sold them, don't want them anymore. And so they begin this mind manipulation of turning the kid away from his parents. And after 48 hours, you're never going to find them. And what happens to them then? They end up, in these pedophile rings. They end up, there were pictures of Johnny Gosch and some of these other kids coming back to the parents. It's an ungodly story. And what happens as they grow older? They become people that actually kidnap other kids. So the brainwashing goes very deep. And this goes on, what's the biggest crime they say in the world? Child trafficking, human trafficking. And so when I watched the Paterno story there, my mind went directly to, okay, now let's forget about Paterno, let's forget about Sandusky. Where do these pedophile rings come from? And Second Mile, the charity organization that he started, with probably the help of some of the people that you'll never hear about in that case. And that's why Sandusky was allowed to, molest hundreds of children. They got him on 45 counts. Hundreds of children from 1978 to 2000 and whatever. What did they have in 2000? I can't remember. 8 or 9, somewhere in there. 11? I can't remember. So what happens now? So Sandusky's in prison. Okay, when he was caught, he was 69 years old. Paterno's dead. The other people involved were indicted. But whatever happened to Second Mile? Whatever happened to the elites who obviously were taking these kids? Nothing. And just like Jim Rothstein, the police detective, told me on my show many times, who'd researched this in depth for many, many years, he said investigations of the highest level people never get done. He said they'll always throw to the wolves somebody like Jerry Sandusky, some other pedophile, to protect the real problem, the real people. That's why Cardinal Spellman never got caught. And they had evidence from a kid who took his shoe, stole Cardinal Spellman's shoe when he didn't want to be molested, and that was in St. Patrick's Cathedral, over there where he lived in New York. And Jim Rothstein was the detective on the case, had them nailed to rights, and guess what happened? Spellman got off. You know what Spellman told the police, because he paid the police. I mean, the police were in his pocket. He said the kid broke into his quarters and stole his shoe. Now, why would a kid who has about a size 9, 8, a small foot, steal Cardinal Spellman's shoe? Why would he steal one shoe? It makes no sense. But that was Spellman's story, and he never, ever gets close to being indicted for pedophilia. So when you start talking about pedophilia, you got to start right at the top in the Vatican and work your way down to the White House and keep working with all the people in Washington. And you can go to London, you can go all over the place in these big, huge cities, in these countries. I don't care if you choose Australia or you choose Mexico or you choose any country. You're going to find the same thing happening. So, catch the Joe Paterno story. It's on HBO. They usually play it a few times. They'll play it a number of times. So catch that movie. It was a good performance, too, by Al Pacino. Okay, I wanted to get Joe Paterno out of the way. Okay, I had something else I wanted to talk about, but we might as well get on with World War III, right? I don't know if you're like me. I've been following, I don't know how many years now. I've been doing this show for almost 15 years. And before that, I was a journalist overseas in Rome and also here in America for a while. And I've been hearing about World War III for 25 years. Okay? It's always going to start. Never starts. And I don't know about you, but I'm about ready to just get it over with, right? If you're going to do it, do it. Because there's so many people. I know back even 10 years ago, only people like me and others on the internet who were, nosy people who happened to be journalists and couldn't find an outlet anymore because they didn't, you know how America has changed. Okay, so like I said, let's get on with it. I mean, I've never, in all these years that I've done this show, there's always the threat from China, the threat from Russia. Then, of course, we now are hearing from North Korea. And the battle lines are pretty well drawn, if you know what I mean. If we're setting up the stage for World War III, we've had 1, 2. I mean, everything comes in threes, right? 3 strikes, you're out. 3's a crowd, everything. So, they got to be, and the Jesuits have to have another one. It's just a question of when, where, the setting, and the scenario will be similar to World War II. The spark that blew the world up was, Pearl Harbor. Okay, so we had Pearl Harbor. Then we had another Pearl Harbor with 9/11 to get us into Iraq forever and Afghanistan, so we could get a foothold on the drug trade in Afghanistan and keep the poppy fields going. So that that whole scenario of 9/11 15 years ago was a setup for what they want to do. And what they want to do is take down America and in a sense, take it down for us, not take it down for them, because they will definitely rebuild, but a whole different scenario, a whole different America. Now, they wouldn't have taken down those two Twin Towers if they didn't have a longer-term goal. And their goal is coming to fruition right now. Now, I remember 8 to 9 years ago, we were sitting there on the show talking about, there's got to be World War III coming up in the next week with what's happening. But as you saw with Bush, if you start understanding these people, and first understanding that Bush, Trump, Obama, all are on the same team. They play different sides of the coin, the one's a Democrat, one's a Republican, etc., etc. But they're all working together. And on the other side, the Chinese leader, the Putin and Kim Jong-un from North Korea are all on the same team. And these guys work together, and they create the chaos needed for the conflicts so that in the end, the real controllers of the New World Order get their way. What do they want? And so when you look at Syria, you're seeing that this kind of action going on there, just in the last 40, I think it happened Sunday night, where they've accused Assad regime in Syria of using chemical weapons on people outside of Damascus, killing over 40, etc., etc. And what that reminded me of was a year ago, the same thing happened. And so a year ago, everybody's saying, okay, this is war. And then Trump went in and blew some bombs up there, and the conflict ended right there. So that didn't accelerate from that point. 8 months after that, we learned that the mainstream media was even reporting that, it wasn't Assad that did that. That was not him. They couldn't prove he did it. So now the same thing happens again. Previously, Trump pulled out of Syria, correct? And that was strategic as well. So what makes me think that World War III is imminent now, when I've said it many times before, and many other people have said it? Well, it looks as if there's a lot more chess pieces falling into place this time. And if you followed it long enough, there's got to be a lot happening behind the scenes so that when they do click off that false flag, and could the Syria event be the false flag? It doesn't really matter if Assad did it or not. Trump says for sure he did it. Putin says we didn't do it. And then the battle lines are drawn. But this time, what's different? What is really different this time than from a year ago, or 8 years ago, or 10 years ago? What is different? We're going to get to that in the second half hour, because I think you'll understand that this time, after all these years, perhaps we're very, very close to Babylon falling. We're going to read a little bit from Revelations to give you the backdrop to this. And you may understand that, wow, is it going to happen in your lifetime? Well, we'll find out in the next half hour on the Investigative Journal. By the way, if you're looking for something good, hemp, for health and wealth, I represent a hemp company. If you want to improve your health before World War III hits, contact me at gregbeacon@gmail.com. That's GREGBEACON@gmail.com. Back in 3 minutes on the Investigative Journal.
The program you are listening to is 100% sponsored by you, the listener, on this First Amendment Rights Media channel. You will notice that there are few commercials on this radio network. There's a good reason for that. Corporate advertising dollars come with strings that limit program content. So without your help, these programs cannot continue on internet or our several affiliates. If you benefit by the educational law programs, we ask you to give. If you are admonished or nurtured by the Bible and ministry programs, we ask you to give. If some voice a cause that you are passionate about, we ask you to give. If you believe in any of these, we ask you to support them as you would a missionary on a continual basis, as if giving a tithe for missionary radio. These programs are not commercially viable and must be supported by those faithful to the cause of truth. Look for the button to sponsor your favorite programs at our listen and schedule pages on the internet. Then, when you subscribe, we will send you the last quarterly MP3 CD of that program immediately, and continue to do so with each new quarter. We will also give you unlimited archive access to all of our programs. We're asking you to give much less than a tithe, so that you may also send support directly to a particular program host, cause, and anywhere else the Spirit may lead you. Do all to the glory of our God and Creator, for His holy nation, the only kingdom that will last forever. Thank you for listening.
The book of Revelation says, "The spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus Christ." This is at the very heart of FirstAmendmentRadio.com. In that spirit, we have created the Prophecy Reality News app for all of your mobile devices, streaming First Amendment Radio 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Available for your Apple, Android device, and smartphone, absolutely free. Get the Prophecy Reality News app installed today so you can listen to First Amendment Radio wherever you are. The Prophecy.
Hi, Greg Anthony here from the Investigative Journal, and I've never steered you wrong before when it comes to talking about the truth regarding your political and social worlds you live in. And I don't plan on steering you wrong today when I say get involved in the hemp revolution, hemp for health and wealth. I know of some of the best hemp oils on the market. If you haven't tried them, you have to. And pay attention, they're lab tested. So contact me, Greg Anthony, at gregbeacon@gmail.com. That's Greg Beacon, G-R-E-G, B like boy, E-A-C-O-N.com. And I'll hook you up with some of the best hemp products on the market. And if you want to become a sales associate and make some money selling hemp to your friends and family, do that. Contact Greg Anthony at the Investigative Journal, Greg Beacon at gmail.com, Greg Beacon at gmail.com.
The following program is labeled dangerous and off limits by the supreme Jesuit command. But stand tall, people. Listen up, and you may just learn something.
Oh, dear Lord Jesus, this ain't happening, man. This can't be happening, man. This isn't happening.
Okay, we're back. Promised to get right to World War III, correct? And why do I think that World War III is closer than ever, when I've said it many times in the past and been wrong? Well, first of all, I hope I am wrong again. But following this story for years and years, I've never seen a build-up from all angles of what's going on in America, what's going on in Russia, what's going on in the Middle East and Israel, what's going on in China, North Korea, to get one to a point where you have to really sit back and say, yeah, maybe now is the time. And it's been building up so many years that people have become comfortable with that. See what I mean? You've been, the more times you cry wolf or think something's going to happen and it doesn't happen, then your guard is down for when it really does happen. Remember? Remember Sun Tzu's Art of War, when he says to always inflict the most damage when the enemy knows you're not coming or thinks you're not coming. So when people become complacent like this, when they become comfortable, and what I'm talking about is that in the alternative media world, people are always looking for the conspiracy theory, always, the survivalists come from there. People who have, for years, put food away in their pantry, put water away in their pantry, waiting for that day when World War III erupts and the bombs start blowing, and etc., etc. And the fear element becomes one that, okay, if it hasn't happened for the last 15 years, it's not going to happen. But could it be that now is the time when most people, when you say World War III is coming, will say, well, that's impossible. Two, the people that have been following it will say, well, they've done it we've said World War III is going to happen for the last 20 years and it's never happening, so it ain't going to happen. But that, to me, is the time they strike. And you can't get comfortable. Because what if it is here? And you don't think it's possible? Think again. Because here's why I think it is. Now, just look back to World War II. When you look to Germany and Poland, one day they're going to the opera. The next day they're in concentration camps. They had no idea either. So the element of surprise to people when war breaks out is always the key to the elite getting what they want, the massive attack, the most casualties that they can have, and people aren't ready for it. So, why do I think now is, and I hope I'm wrong, but you have to dedicate at least one radio show to this. Because if you listen to the mainstream media, which I do, you're going to hear for 24 hours straight now, you've heard it since Sunday, the clamorings of every aspect of war. You know, why do I think it's happening? Well, for months now, we've heard about North Korea and the nuclear threats, right? I'm, for one, not sure nuclear weapons even exist, but they can do massive damage without them. Secondly, when that kind of dies down, remember you heard, Kim Jong-un and the Chinese have gotten together and they have a pact. Kim Jong-un will not use nuclear weapons and he will demilitarize the Korean Peninsula. That to me was a warning. What? You're going to believe China? Because China is working with the New World Order and with Trump and the New World Order on this side to create a war. Because none of those leaders are going to fight in it, are they? No. And what is their main goal? Depopulation. What's a good way to do it? Well, they can do it through, famine and disease, which they try. They can do it through chemtrails and other things which destroy food and make people sick. They do that quite well. But they don't seem to diminish the population, right? They can do it through starvation like they do in Africa. They can do it through, remember what happened in Rwanda? Genocides. They can do it there. But, if they want to get down to what they say on the Georgia Guidestones in Georgia, if you've ever read those, 500 million, they got to work a lot faster and kill a lot more people quickly to get to that goal. Now, why would I say that's their goal? Well, they've told you that. Bill Gates has told you that. Ted Turner has told you that. The Georgia Guidestones, what they put there, have told you that. And even, Agenda 21 has told you that. There have been many, many signs of what they plan, but how are they going to do it? Well, they can do it through a number of ways. Well, one, they have a huge conflict involving the biggest countries in the world, and all the others are going to fall in place. So why do I think now? Well, let's look to, first of all, what do you think? Do you think Babylon has fallen? And when I say Babylon, some people say America is Babylon, others say not. But let's just, for the sake of argument, say Babylon has fallen. And let's just, for the sake of argument, say that America for the last, at least since the Industrial Revolution, has been the queen sitting on the top of the world, right? And we know behind the scenes America's a dirty, rotten player. in the world. We know that. And what do? They create wars. They move into countries and they destabilize them for reasons. And, it isn't just American people. It isn't American people at all. It is the New World Order at work through their leaders, their minions. So if we consider at this point that Babylon is America and is fallen, you look to Revelations 18:7. Now, why do I look to the Bible? Now, some of you will say, well, Greg, you're a Bible believer. I'll say, okay, let's just for argument's sake say, no, I'm not a Bible believer today. Okay, let's just say for argument's sake that the Bible is used by the Vatican and the Jesuits to prepare their game plan. They follow what's said in those in the prophecies, so that in the end they can create the false Messiah. Okay? So what happens is you're going to get Bible believers who strictly believe this is the Word of God. Okay? And this is how it's going to play out. Then you get others who don't, like the Vatican. The Vatican, I believe, believes that, one, that it is the Word of God and they are on the side of Satan, or two, they're going to use it as a benefit, as a deception. They're going to use the Bible to get their way. So whatever they think, whether they believe they're Satanists or they believe in God or they don't, they can use these words that so many people believe in to get what they want. So the reason that I present it this way is because not everybody believes the Bible is the Word of God. So I don't want to leave those people out. But when you read it, so many people won't even read it, but if you read it with the idea that some enemy of yours is using it to get to you, then maybe you'd look at it a little bit more. And then some people come to the revelation that this is the true Word of God. And, I don't think that's bad at all. If people want to, people can believe what they want. That's what this country was founded on. I grew up with with that thinking. I didn't know when I grew up that there was some kind of secret plan to take the country to hell and back. But that's what's happening. Now, if Babylon is falling and Americans Babylon, let's look at what they say. What that book says. It says, give back to her as she has done to others. They always refer to a country as a her, right? Pay her back double for what she has done. Now, what has America done to get paid back double? Like I said, if you really look at what we've done, and I'm not saying you, me, or anybody living today is responsible, because I am not responsible for what's happened in the past. But I can look at history and say, yes, if you get through the revisionist history written by the Jesuits and you get to the truth, you'll find that America's been an interventionist country. It's been a country that moves in places and basically takes what it wants, and leaves a bad taste in the mouth with many people around the world. You can go to a lot of places in the world, they do not like America. Why? Because either they consider America to be a big brother, and you know how you feel when somebody's your big brother and takes advantage, bullies you, you don't like them. Or they downright hate it because they've seen the atrocities that have happened. Now, that's a view of America you'll get from other countries, but then you'll see the same countries that feel that way are the first ones to buy a new pair of jeans, the first ones to buy a new American car, the first ones to want to get to America. But anyway, pay her back double for what she has done. That's what the Bible's saying. Mix her with, I've just had a glitch here. Okay, I've had a glitch in my brain. Okay, mix her a double portion in her own cup. Well, you know what that means. Blow the hell out of her, right? To the degree that she has glorified herself and lived in luxury. Who would say, look it, there's a lot of Americans who don't live in luxury. But when you look at the world in general, and you look at third world countries and things in Africa and places all over, they look at America and they go, you gluttonous people. Everybody, people in Africa are worried about walking 3 miles to get some water. And in America, if you lose your power for 5 minutes, you're going to die. Or if you lose your cell phone for a day, you're going to die. So, to the degree that she's been glorified herself and lived in luxury, inflict on her that much torment and misery. So what is it saying? Inflict on the people who've lived in luxury as much torment and misery as other people in the world have experienced. And in her heart she says, I sit as a queen. I am not a widow and will never see mourning. So what is that? That is like, if you look at American people who are oblivious to what's going on, even today, when the wings and the winds of war are blowing and flying all over the place, they say, oh, everything is going to be great. I'll never be in mourning. We have everything here. And then it goes on to say in verse 8, therefore her plagues will come in one day, death and misery and famine. So what does that mean? That means if the Jesuits and your enemies are following this book, they're going to make it a quick war, but a devastating one. And she will be consumed by fire, for mighty is the Lord God who judges her. So, when they say consumed by fire, it doesn't mean they're going to, light a match. It means that things will appear, a city will look like Berlin again, right? LA will look like Berlin. So, if that's the case, when is that going to happen? Is it going to happen? Well, man can make it happen, right? If you believe in God, God can make it happen, right? If you believe in the New World Order, as I do, and the way the Jesuits and these people work, they can make it happen. And the perfect scenario is there. People are complacent. People know nothing about it. So they have little resistance. And guess what? They have all their ducks in a row. And let me explain to you. Now, Trump, as of yesterday, was meeting with his military cabinet, who is, it's a hawkish cabinet. He's put together John Bolton and others who are quick to pull the trigger on war. And that's led me to believe something's happening. If you look at his cabinet, it's a military cabinet now. He's got, he calls Mad Dog Mattis, the head of the military at the Pentagon. He brings John Bolton in as the national security advisor, who he'll go to war at the drop of a hat. And so that's not a good sign. Now, we knew during the Obama administration nothing was going to happen because Obama's goal, let's go back to Bush, the little boy Bush. His goal was to get us into Afghanistan, to control 9/11, to allow 9/11 to happen on his watch. Obama's goal was to demilitarize and destabilize America around the world, as well as weaken us, domestically. And he did a good job in 8 years. Trump's goal now is to build it up again and go to war. And that's exactly what it looks like now. So with a guy like Trump at the head, and you got a military group in there now pulling the strings, they don't need Congress to do anything right now. And they're a bunch of lapdogs anyway. They'll say they don't want to go to war, but they're all the top guys in Congress are in the pocket of the Jesuits and the New World Order as well, just like they are in Israel. So we have Trump now, after this, could it be a false flag or whatever with the sarin gas in Syria, stating that we are going to hit Syria hard. I can't tell you when because I don't like to tell you when, but, he's going to do something. And they're meeting now. And maybe they've decided that was last night when I heard that. And I was thinking to myself, maybe it is time to shut the TV off, shut everything off, and not even think about it anymore for a while. And when the bombs start falling go, oh, I told you so. But anyway, what happens then after Trump puts that out? Let's look. Russia's warning the U.S. against any military intervention in Syria over the government's alleged chemical attack against civilians, that's Syria, this weekend, saying any such response would be unacceptable and lead to the most serious consequences. Well, what are serious consequences? Yeah. I mean, what are you talking about? What can Russia do outside of use the weapons that we, with Western money, have given them to build up their military? We, with Western money, have given China the money to build up their military. What are they going to do? Well, their plan is to attack us with the help of us. And that's why the New World Order is what it is, and it's not what you hear on the mainstream. Now, the Foreign Ministry in Moscow also said in a statement on its website that allegations of the chemical attack are fabricated. Okay, so here we get the story now. You get a chemical attack, whether it happened or not, and whether it was a CIA, Mossad front, whether it was the New World Order working to, start the match, to start the fire. We say it happened. Our government says it happened. Russia says you're lying. Somebody else did it. You just want to get into a war with us. Suggesting the claims Russia's saying were invented by rebel forces. And when they say rebel forces, they mean forces formed by the CIA. And the Syrian civil defense known as the White Helmets. Okay? Group that the UN's put in there. Now, here's what they say in Russia. It is necessary to warn against that military invention under invented and fabricated pretext in Syria, where at the request of the lawful government there are Russian military personnel, is absolutely unacceptable and can lead to the most serious consequences. The aim of these false speculations that have no basis is to shield the terrorists and the irreconcilable radical opposition who reject political solution at the same time while trying to justify possible armed strikes from outside. So really what they're saying to their people is that America is trying to create World War III. But we are not going to stand for it. Now in America, what do you hear? Just the opposite. The Hegelian dialectic at work. Russia and Iran together are backing Assad in Syria in an inevitable fight to end Israel. Now what happens when Israel gets involved? America has to come to the rescue, and there's all-out war. But Americans will believe that it's caused by the Russians or the Chinese or the North Koreans against, or Iran. Those are the battlegrounds on their side. And we have to fight and stand for freedom. So each side their people are getting a different story, right? Just the way that the Jesuits like it. Now the people in the middle, like the poor people in Syria, who 500,000 have already been killed in Syria. Can you believe this? And no one talks about that. You don't hear that. 500,000 people, they say, have died in Syria. Why? Well, there's some oil pipelines behind the scenes that we can talk about, but let's just look at the big picture. There has to be a conflict with Israel. That's what the Bible said. And this is what this first step here with Syria and Trump bombing Syria will lead to. If it, who knows, anything could happen. I mean, things always don't go as scheduled. Especially when it comes to war. But, like I said, they've been trying and doing this for a long time. I say, it's about time. Now, the alleged attack on Saturday, or was it Sunday? I think it says here, I think it was early in our time, I don't know, killed 40 in the rebel-held town of Duma, which is not near Damascus. Multiple opposition and rescue groups included the Associated Press, which is unable to independently verify the reports. And it came a year, now listen to this, and a day after Trump ordered dozens of strikes on a Syrian regime air base, for its alleged use of sarin gas, April 4th, 2017, that killed approximately 100 people, according to the State Department. More than 30 of the victims were children. The government of Syria, Bashar al-Assad, denied the, attack. And then after that, Trump, meanwhile, again, blasted Putin and the government of Iran. So there we go. We see that connection now. Trump blasting Putin and Iran. Russia and Iran, who are backing Assad, who Trump dubbed Animal Assad in the country's year-long civil war. So we have Russia saying it's there to kill ISIS, when in fact ISIS is a creation of the New World Order. They're there for other reasons. And, we can go to the Trump's tweets, mindless chemical attack, all these things. But there you see the scenario building, right? So, as Trump blasts Syria, officials and we talked about what's going on in Russia. What if the officials hints in this country? A military attack, an all-out military attack. And you can bet with the cabinet that Trump has put together, what do you think they're going to do? Do what Obama did? No. Obama's goal was not to do that. This is the goal of this New World Order team. And he lashed out at Putin and Iran. Moscow struck back. The attack reportedly killed. We talked about that. Trump's Twitter tweets. But what is it leading to? Leading to the early stages of this Syrian civil war. Obama said, remember, chemical weapons were used, and he drew that red line, exactly what he was ordered to do. He said, we're drawing a red line in the sand, but he never did anything. And the reason he didn't anything, because that was the game plan, was to continually build up the other side, while America saw itself weakened and not respected around the world for any kind of strength. But that was a plan. Now it's the other way around. What's another reason that war could be inevitable? Well, I don't know if you follow the financial aspect of it, but they need money, right? Trump got $721 billion for the military this year. Why? What are they going to do with that? They got to, one, he said, half our planes won't fly. Half our ships won't sail. We no longer can win a war on two fronts, right? Like America's military always said, we have to be prepared to win a war on two fronts. Now it's not. So we're weakened now. So Trump's now spending all this money. Why? Because, hell, America, we got to put up some kind of fight, right? So he gets $728 billion, but in that budget plan, he got nothing for what he ran for as a president. He got no money for the wall. He got, we're going to build the wall, but he got no money for it. He didn't get any response on DACA. He didn't get anything he wanted there. So all the people he was talking about in America, he got nothing except the money for the military, and that's what he said. I have to keep America strong, and that's why I signed this ridiculous bill, because the Democrats wouldn't do anything. Well, that's a bunch of BS. All they wanted to do was to get more money in the military so they could put up some kind of fight. Now they're getting the same amount of money next year. Okay? So that's another thing you got to think about. Why would they be doing this? Now you say, well, I ran over time. Gonna have to say good night on the Investigative Journal.
Since the beginning of time, kings have sought it, nations have fought for it. It has been traded, it has been borrowed, it has been purchased, it has been stolen. There's a reason for it. To secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity. Invest with the security of gold and silver. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188 or visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net. Listen to Financial Survival with your host Melody Cedarstrom right here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com at 4 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net. or call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free, 1-800-375-4188.